The rain had finally stopped, but Rebecca's day was already a disaster. She stood in the hotel lobby, her phone buzzing with missed calls, while her 2-year-old twins decided this was the perfect moment to test her patience. Little Maya was pulling at her dress, and her brother Ethan had just knocked over a display of promotional brochures. "I'm so sorry," Rebecca muttered to the hotel staff, trying to gather the scattered papers while keeping both toddlers from running in opposite directions. She was already 40 minutes late to her best friend's wedding, and the morning had been one crisis after another. First, the babysitter canceled. Then Maya threw up on her original outfit. Then traffic on the highway had been a nightmare. She glanced at the hotel directory board, squinting at the fancy lettering. Garden room, garden room. Where was it? Her eyes landed on what she thought said garden ballroom, and she made a split-second decision. No time to ask for directions. She scooped up Ethan, grabbed Maya's hand, and rushed toward the double doors at the end of the hallway. The moment she stepped inside, she should have known something was off. The room was enormous, decorated with what looked like 1,000,000 white roses and crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than her car. Everything sparkled. Even the chairs had silk covers with actual diamonds sewn into them, or at least they looked like diamonds. Rebecca hesitated. Had her friend's family really spent this much money? She knew they were well off, but this was something else entirely. The guests around her wore designer dresses and jewelry that caught the light with every movement. She looked down at her simple blue dress, the one she'd grabbed in a panic after Maya's incident, and suddenly felt very out of place. But the ceremony was already starting. The music swelled and everyone stood up. Rebecca quickly slipped into an empty seat at the very back, settling Ethan on her lap and pulling Maya close beside her. At least she'd made it. Her friend would understand why she was late. She always did. The bride appeared at the entrance, and Rebecca had to admit the wedding was beautiful. Maybe her friend had wanted to go all out for her special day. The bride wore a dress that looked like it belonged in a magazine, with a train so long it took 3 people to carry it. As she walked down the aisle, Rebecca bounced Ethan gently, trying to keep him quiet. Then the groom turned around and Rebecca's entire world stopped. She knew that face. She knew those eyes, that jawline, the way he stood with his shoulders just slightly tense. Her heart slammed against her ribs so hard she thought everyone around her must be able to hear it. Alexander Chen, the man she'd loved, the man she'd run from, the man who had no idea that the 2 children sitting with her right now were his. 3 years. It had been 3 years since she'd last seen him. 3 years since she'd disappeared from his life without explanation, blocking his number and moving to a different city. 3 years of telling herself she'd made the right choice, that leaving had been the only option. And now here he was, standing at the altar, about to marry someone else. Rebecca's hands started shaking. She needed to leave. Right now. This was wrong, all of it was wrong. She'd walked into the wrong wedding, and not just any wrong wedding, but his wedding. This couldn't be happening. But before she could move, Alexander's eyes swept across the crowd, and then they landed on her. She watched the color drain from his face. His mouth opened slightly, like he wanted to say something but couldn't remember how to form words. His best man whispered something to him, probably asking if he was okay, but Alexander didn't respond. He just stared. No, Rebecca realized with growing horror. He wasn't staring at her. His eyes had moved down to the children beside her, to Ethan, who had Alexander's exact same dimple in his chin, the one that appeared when he was thinking hard about something, to Maya, who had inherited his dark, expressive eyes and the unusual widow's peak in her hairline that Alexander had always been self-conscious about. The resemblance was unmistakable. Anyone who knew Alexander well would see it immediately, and he was seeing it now in the middle of his own wedding ceremony, probably doing the math in his head. 2-year-old twins, 3 years since Rebecca had vanished. The officiant cleared his throat, clearly confused about why the groom had gone silent. The bride, a tall woman with perfect posture and an expensive-looking tiara, turned to look at Alexander with concern. She followed his gaze to the back of the room, to Rebecca and the children. "Alexander?" the bride said, her voice carrying in the silent ballroom. He snapped back to attention, his face flushing red. "Sorry," he managed, his voice rough. "Sorry, I thought I saw—" He didn't finish the sentence. He turned back to the officiant and somehow made it through the rest of the ceremony. But Rebecca could see his hands trembling as he repeated his vows. She could see him glancing back every few seconds as if checking to make sure she was really there, that he hadn't imagined her. Rebecca sat frozen, unable to move. Ethan had gotten heavy on her lap, and Maya was playing with the fabric of her dress, completely unaware that her entire world might be about to change. Rebecca's mind raced through her options. She could slip out now during the ceremony and disappear again. Change her number again, move again, keep running, but something stopped her. Maybe it was the way Alexander had looked at the twins with such immediate recognition and wonder. Maybe it was the guilt she'd been carrying for 3 years, getting heavier every day. Maybe she was just tired of running. The ceremony ended. The bride and groom kissed and everyone applauded. Rebecca stayed in her seat trying to make herself invisible, hoping she could just wait until everyone left and then sneak out. But as the newly married couple walked back down the aisle, Alexander's eyes found hers again. And this time he didn't look away. He said something to his bride, something that made her frown, and then he gestured to someone off to the side. A man in a dark suit appeared near Rebecca's row. He was polite but firm, the kind of person who was used to getting what he wanted without having to raise his voice. "Excuse me, miss," he said quietly, leaning down so only she could hear. "Mr. Chen would like to speak with you. If you could please wait in the lobby after the ceremony." Rebecca's stomach dropped. "I think there's been a mistake," she started to say. "I was actually supposed to be at a different wedding. I should just—" "Please," the man repeated, and though his tone was still polite, it wasn't really a request. "Just a few minutes of your time. In the lobby." He moved away before she could argue, positioning himself near the exit like he was making sure she didn't try to leave. Rebecca looked down at her children, at their innocent faces, and felt the weight of 3 years of secrets pressing down on her chest. She'd walked into the wrong wedding. But maybe, somehow, it was exactly where she needed to be. As guests filed out of the ballroom, heading toward the reception, Rebecca gathered her children and walked slowly toward the lobby. Her heart pounded with every step. She had no idea what she was going to say, how she could possibly explain what she'd done, why she'd kept his children from him. All she knew was that the moment Alexander had seen Maya and Ethan, everything had changed. There was no going back now. No more running. The truth was finally going to come out, whether she was ready for it or not. Rebecca made it halfway across the lobby before her legs started shaking. She found a bench near the elevators and sat down, pulling both twins close to her. Maya was getting fussy and Ethan kept asking for juice in his little voice that usually melted her heart. But right now all she could think about was the fact that Alexander was coming. He was coming and she had no idea what to say to him. 3 years of rehearsing this conversation in her head, and now that it was actually happening, every single word had vanished from her mind. "Mama juice," Ethan said again, tugging at her sleeve. "In a minute, baby," Rebecca whispered, digging through her bag for the sippy cups she always carried. Her hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped one. She'd just gotten both kids settled with their drinks when she heard footsteps. Expensive shoes on marble floors, the kind of sound that announces someone important is arriving. Rebecca looked up, and there he was. Alexander had loosened his tie and his hair was slightly messed up, like he'd been running his hands through it. He'd always done that when he was stressed. Some things hadn't changed, but everything else had. He looked older, more tired. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, and on his left hand a wedding ring caught the light. He stopped a few feet away from her, just staring. Up close, she could see his chest rising and falling too quickly, like he'd been running, or like he couldn't catch his breath. "Rebecca." Her name came out rough, almost broken. "Is it really you?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. Maya had noticed the stranger and pressed closer to Rebecca's side, suddenly shy. But Ethan, always the curious one, stared at Alexander with wide eyes. Alexander's gaze moved to the children, and Rebecca watched his face go through a dozen different emotions in seconds. Shock, wonder, pain, and then something that looked like anger. "How old are they?" His voice was quiet, but there was an edge to it that made Rebecca's throat tighten. 2.5, she managed to say. 2.5. He repeated the words like he was testing them, doing the math. His jaw clenched. "So when you disappeared 3 years ago, when you blocked my number and moved without telling anyone where you went, you were pregnant. With my children." It wasn't a question, but Rebecca nodded anyway. Alexander closed his eyes and took a deep breath like he was trying very hard not to lose control. When he opened them again, there were tears there. Why, Rebecca? I thought, her voice cracked. She cleared her throat and tried again. I thought you were getting engaged. To someone else. I heard people talking about it at your office. They said your family had arranged everything, that you were going to marry your business partner's daughter. What? Alexander looked genuinely confused. Rebecca, I have no idea what you're talking about. Catherine Hartwick, Rebecca said, the name still bitter on her tongue after all these years. I heard your secretary telling someone that you were having dinner with her and her father to finalize the engagement. I even drove by the restaurant that night and saw you there with them. Understanding dawned on Alexander's face, followed by something that looked like horror. That dinner. Rebecca, that was the night I told Hartwick I couldn't merge our companies. I told him I was in love with someone else and I couldn't marry his daughter, even if it meant losing the biggest business deal of my life. Rebecca felt like the floor had disappeared beneath her. What? I was talking about you. Alexander's voice broke. I went home that night planning to tell you everything the next day. I was going to ask you to move in with me. I had this whole speech prepared about how I didn't care that you were still in grad school, or that everyone said we were moving too fast. I was ready to tell my family to back off about the business marriage they wanted. But you never called, Rebecca whispered. The next day you didn't call. Because you were already gone. Alexander ran a hand through his hair, that old familiar gesture. Your phone was disconnected. Your apartment was empty. Your roommate said you'd moved out in the middle of the night and didn't leave a forwarding address. I thought something terrible had happened to you. I hired investigators, Rebecca. I spent 3 months looking for you. The world felt like it was tilting. All this time, all these years, she'd been so sure she was doing the right thing. She'd convinced herself that Alexander would be relieved he didn't have to deal with an unexpected pregnancy, that she was saving him from obligation and resentment. I was trying to protect you, she said weakly. I didn't want you to feel trapped. I didn't want the babies to grow up with a father who resented them. Resent them? Alexander's voice rose slightly. Then he caught himself and lowered it again, conscious of the children watching. Rebecca, I spent 3 years thinking you were dead or hurt, or that I'd done something so terrible you had to run from me. And all that time I had children I didn't know about. Maya started to whimper, picking up on the tension in the air. Rebecca automatically started rubbing her back, making soothing sounds. Alexander watched the gesture and something in his face crumpled. Can I? He took a step closer, then stopped himself. Can I talk to them? Rebecca's first instinct was to say no, to grab her children and run again. But she looked at Alexander's face, at the desperate hope there, and she couldn't do it. They're your kids too, she said quietly. Alexander knelt down slowly, bringing himself to eye level with the twins. Ethan tilted his head, studying the stranger with Alexander's own curious expression. Maya peeked out from behind Rebecca's arm. Hi, Alexander said softly. My name is Alexander. What's your name? Ethan, the little boy announced proudly. I'm 2. 2? Wow, that's pretty big. Alexander's voice was gentle, but Rebecca could hear it shaking. Is this your sister? That's Maya. She's shy. Ethan said it like he was sharing important information. That's okay. I get shy sometimes, too. Alexander looked at Maya, who was slowly emerging from her hiding spot. Hi, Maya. She didn't answer, but she gave him a tiny wave. That small gesture seemed to break something in Alexander. He blinked rapidly, clearly fighting tears. They're beautiful, he whispered, looking up at Rebecca. They're perfect. For a moment, they just stayed like that, frozen in this bubble where it was just the 4 of them. Then reality came crashing back in the form of rushed footsteps. There you are. A woman's voice, cold and sharp. Alexander, what on earth are you doing? You left our reception. Our guests are asking where the groom disappeared to. The bride stood there in all her wedding glory, her dress now seeming more like armor. She looked at Rebecca, then at the children, then back at Alexander with understanding and fury dawning in her eyes. Who are they? She demanded. Alexander stood up slowly, positioning himself slightly between his bride and Rebecca's children. Protective, Rebecca noticed. The instinct was already there. Victoria, this is Rebecca. We dated 3 years ago. 3 years ago. Victoria's eyes narrowed as she looked at the twins again. She was clearly doing the same math everyone else had done. And these children just happened to be here? At our wedding? It was a mistake, Rebecca said quickly, standing up with Maya in her arms. I was supposed to be at a different wedding. I got confused with the rooms. I'm sorry, I'll just go. No. Alexander's voice was firm. He turned to Victoria. We need to talk. All of us. All of us? Victoria let out a sharp laugh. Alexander, we've been married for exactly 1 hour. 1 hour and you're already… They're my children, Alexander said quietly but with absolute certainty. I didn't know. Rebecca didn't tell me. But they're mine, Victoria. Anyone with eyes can see it. Victoria looked at the twins again, really looked this time. Rebecca saw the moment she recognized the resemblance. The other woman's face went pale, then red, then pale again. This is unbelievable, Victoria breathed. This is absolutely unbelievable. She turned on her heel and walked away, but not toward the reception. Toward the hotel's business center, pulling out her phone. Rebecca heard her say something about lawyers before she disappeared around the corner. Alexander looked torn, glancing between the direction his bride had gone and the children in front of him. You should go after her, Rebecca said. She's your wife. You just got married today. This is supposed to be the happiest day of your life and I've ruined it. The happiest day of my life? Alexander looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Rebecca, I just found out I'm a father. I just found out that the woman I spent 3 years looking for has been alive this whole time, raising our children alone. Nothing about today makes sense anymore. He crouched down again, bringing himself back to the twins' level. Hey, Ethan, Maya, I have to go talk to someone for a little bit, but I really want to see you both again soon. Would that be okay? Ethan nodded enthusiastically. Maya, still quiet, nodded too. Alexander reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, writing something on the back. He handed it to Rebecca. That's my personal number. The one that doesn't go through assistants or secretaries. Please, Rebecca. Please don't disappear again. We need to figure this out. Rebecca took the card, her fingers brushing his for just a second. I won't run, she promised. Not this time. Alexander nodded, standing up. He looked at the twins one more time, memorizing their faces, then walked away toward where Victoria had gone. Rebecca sat back down on the bench, suddenly exhausted. Ethan climbed into her lap and Maya pressed against her side. They had no idea that their whole world had just shifted, and neither did Rebecca really. She just knew that after 3 years of hiding, the truth was finally out. Now they all had to figure out what came next. Rebecca didn't leave the hotel. She couldn't explain why exactly. Maybe it was the look in Alexander's eyes when he'd asked her not to run. Maybe it was the guilt that had been eating at her for 3 years. Or maybe she was just tired of making decisions based on fear. She checked into a room using the credit card she kept for emergencies. It wasn't cheap, but nothing about this day had gone according to plan anyway. By 7 in the evening, she'd fed the twins, given them baths in the huge hotel tub, and gotten them into their pajamas. They thought it was a great adventure, staying in a fancy hotel room with its big TV and fluffy robes. Rebecca had just gotten them settled in the bed, reading them a story, when there was a knock at the door. She knew who it was before she even looked through the peephole. Alexander stood in the hallway, still in his wedding clothes but looking completely exhausted. His tie was gone, his jacket was draped over his arm, and his shirt was wrinkled. Rebecca opened the door slowly. Is everything okay with your wife? Can I come in? He asked quietly. Please? She stepped aside and he walked in, stopping short when he saw the twins in the bed. Ethan had already fallen asleep, his little mouth open, one arm thrown over his head. Maya was drowsy, fighting to keep her eyes open. You stayed, Alexander said, and there was so much relief in his voice that Rebecca felt her chest tighten. I told you I wouldn't run. He set his jacket on a chair and moved closer to the bed, looking at the children like he still couldn't quite believe they were real. Maya blinked up at him sleepily. Storyman, she mumbled, which was apparently what she'd decided to call him. Alexander looked at Rebecca, questioning. She handed him the book she'd been reading, a worn copy of a children's story about a bear. She wants you to finish it. He took the book with shaking hands and sat carefully on the edge of the bed. His voice was rough at first, reading about the bear and his adventures, but it steadied as he went. By the time he finished, Maya was asleep, curled up next to her brother. Alexander just sat there for a long moment, watching them breathe. Then he stood up carefully and Rebecca led him to the small sitting area by the window. far enough away that they could talk without waking the kids. "Tell me everything," Alexander said once they were seated. "From the beginning. I need to understand," so Rebecca told him. She told him about the day she'd heard the rumor at his office, about how everyone had been talking about the arranged marriage like it was a done deal. She told him about driving past the restaurant and seeing him with Catherine Hartwick and her father, how official and serious it had all looked. She told him about the pregnancy test she'd taken the next morning, staring at those 2 pink lines and feeling her entire world shift. "I was terrified," she admitted. "You were this successful businessman, and I was just a grad student working part-time at a coffee shop. Your family had never even met me, and then suddenly I was pregnant and I thought you were about to get engaged to someone more suitable, and I panicked, so you left." Alexander's voice wasn't accusatory, just sad. "You decided for both of us. I thought I was protecting everyone. You, the babies, even myself. I didn't want to be the woman who trapped you with an accidental pregnancy. I didn't want my children growing up feeling unwanted." Rebecca wiped at her eyes, frustrated with herself for crying. "I know now that I was wrong. I know I should have talked to you, but at the time it felt like the only option." Alexander was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the city lights. "After you disappeared, I went a little crazy," he finally said. "I hired private investigators. I called every hospital in the state. I contacted your old professors, your roommate, anyone who might know where you'd gone. I thought maybe I'd scared you somehow, or done something terrible that I didn't remember. You didn't do anything wrong. Neither did you, really. You made a choice based on wrong information. A choice I would have disagreed with, but I understand why you made it." He turned to look at her. "I spent 3 years looking for you, Rebecca. Even after the investigators said they couldn't find anything, I kept looking. I had alerts set up for your name, your email, everything. I never stopped. Then why did you get married today?" The question came out before Rebecca could stop it. "If you were still looking for me, why marry someone else?" Alexander's laugh was bitter. "That's a complicated story. We have time." He ran his hands through his hair again, that nervous gesture she remembered so well. "Victoria and it's not a real marriage. Not in the way marriages should be anyway. Her family's company was in trouble. Bad investments, debt, the whole thing. Thousands of people were going to lose their jobs if the company went under. Our families proposed a merger and the marriage was part of the deal." Rebecca felt something twist in her chest. "So you married her for business?" "I married her because I was tired," Alexander said quietly. "Tired of looking for you. Tired of my family pressuring me to settle down. Tired of being alone. Victoria knew I didn't love her. She didn't love me either. It was supposed to be a practical arrangement that helped both our families. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard. Yeah, well, it got a lot sadder about 6 hours ago when I looked up and saw you sitting in the back of the ballroom with 2 children who have my face." He looked toward the bed where the twins slept. "I stood there saying my vows, and all I could think about was that I'd just found out I was a father, and I was making promises to the wrong person." They sat in silence for a while. Rebecca could hear the city sounds through the window. Cars and distant sirens, life going on like normal while her world was completely upside down. "What happens now?" she finally asked. "I don't know." Alexander looked exhausted. Victoria called her lawyers. "She wants to talk tomorrow morning, all of us together. She's furious, and she has every right to be. I ruined her wedding day." "I ruined her wedding day," Rebecca corrected. "If I hadn't walked into that ballroom, then I still would have been marrying her for the wrong reasons. And I still wouldn't have known about Ethan and Maya." He said their names carefully, like he was practicing. At least now everything's out in the open. Rebecca thought about Victoria, about what it must feel like to have your wedding day blow up like that. Is she going to want a divorce? Probably. But it's complicated. The merger, the contracts, her family's company. There are a lot of people depending on this marriage lasting at least until certain deals go through. Alexander shook his head. "That's not your problem to worry about, though. Right now, I just want to know about them, about our children." So Rebecca told him. She told him about the pregnancy, about how scared she'd been doing it alone. She told him about the day they were born, how Ethan came out screaming and Maya came out quiet, already so different from each other. She told him about their first steps, their first words, the way Ethan loved trucks and Maya loved music. Alexander listened to every word like he was memorizing it, like he could somehow collect all these moments he'd missed and store them somewhere safe. His face cycled through emotions, joy and pain and regret all mixed together. Ethan calls trucks vroom vrooms, Rebecca said with a small smile. And Maya hums this little song when she's happy. I have no idea where she learned it, but she does it all the time. I want to be there for the next first, Alexander said firmly. And the one after that and all of them. I don't care how complicated things get with Victoria or the business or anything else. Those are my kids, and I've already missed too much. I know. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Alexander. I know you are. He reached over and took her hand, the first time they'd really touched in 3 years. But we can't go back and change it. We can only move forward from here. There was another knock at the door, more forceful this time. Rebecca and Alexander both froze. Through the peephole, Rebecca could see Victoria standing in the hallway. She was no longer in her wedding dress. Now she wore jeans and a sweater, and she looked just as tired as Alexander did. Rebecca opened the door. I thought I'd find you here, Victoria said to Alexander. Then she looked at Rebecca. We need to talk. All three of us. Is there somewhere we can sit? They moved back to the sitting area, the three of them forming an awkward triangle. Victoria's eyes kept drifting to the bed where the twins slept, her expression unreadable. I've been thinking, Victoria said slowly, about what happened today, about what it means for all of us, and I think I have a solution. Rebecca and Alexander both waited, tense. I need this marriage to last 6 months, Victoria continued. 6 months to finalize the merger and save my father's company. After that, we can divorce quietly and no one gets hurt. Victoria, Alexander started, but she held up a hand. I'm not finished. In exchange for those 6 months, you get to be a father. Not publicly, not yet, but privately. You can see the children, spend time with them, be part of their lives. Rebecca will have whatever support she needs. After 6 months, we end the marriage and you're free to do whatever you want. Rebecca looked at Alexander, trying to read his expression. He looked torn, caught between what he wanted and what he owed. And if I say no, he asked. Victoria's face hardened. Then I make this very complicated for everyone. My lawyers are already drawing up papers. I can make custody battles look like a walk in the park. It wasn't really a choice at all. And from the look on Alexander's face, he knew it. 6 months, he said quietly. And I get to be part of their lives starting now. Starting now, Victoria agreed. She stood up to leave, but paused at the door. For what it's worth, she said, looking at Rebecca. I hope those 6 months go fast. You two clearly have unfinished business. Then she was gone, leaving Rebecca and Alexander alone with a deal that felt like both a blessing and a curse. The first month was harder than any of them expected. Alexander showed up at Rebecca's apartment the morning after the wedding with car seats, toys, and a determination that would have been sweet if it wasn't so overwhelming. He didn't know how to change a diaper properly. He made breakfast that the twins refused to eat. He tried to help with bath time and ended up soaking wet while Ethan and Maya laughed at him, but he kept showing up. Every single day, Rebecca watched him learn how to be a father and fast forward. She watched him figure out that Maya liked her toast cut into triangles, not squares. She watched him discover that Ethan needed his blue blanket to fall asleep, and that both twins got cranky if they missed their afternoon snack. She watched him become theirs piece by piece, moment by moment. It should have been perfect, but it wasn't, because every few days Alexander had to leave. He had to put on an expensive suit and go to charity events with Victoria. He had to smile for cameras and pretend to be a happy newlywed, while his real life was happening in secret. Rebecca saw the photos online. Alexander and Victoria at a museum opening. Alexander and Victoria at a business dinner. They looked like the perfect couple, all polished and successful. And every time Rebecca saw those pictures, something hurt in her chest. You okay? Her neighbor, Mrs. Chen, asked one afternoon. The older woman had come over to drop off some homemade soup and found Rebecca staring at her phone. At another picture of Alexander and Victoria. I'm fine, Rebecca lied, quickly closing the browser. That man who's been coming around, Mrs. Chen said carefully. The one who plays with the twins in the park. He's their father? There was no point in lying. Mrs. Chen had lived next door for 6 months and had watched Rebecca struggle alone with 2 toddlers. She'd probably figured out something had changed. Yes, Rebecca admitted. And he's married to someone else? It's complicated. Mrs. Chen made a sound that suggested she thought it was exactly as simple as it looked. But she didn't push, just patted Rebecca's hand and left the soup. That night, after the twins were asleep, Rebecca sat in her tiny kitchen and let herself admit the truth. She was falling for Alexander all over again, or maybe she'd never stopped falling. Either way, it was a disaster. He was married. He had obligations. And in 5 more months, he'd be free, but free to do what? Be with her, or finally move on with his life? She was still sitting there when her phone rang. Alexander's number. "Hey," she answered. "Aren't you supposed to be at some event tonight?" "I left early." He sounded tired. "Can I come over?" "The twins are already asleep, I know. I need to talk to you, please." 20 minutes later, he was sitting across from her at the kitchen table. He looked exhausted, still in his suit but with his tie loosened and his hair messy from running his hands through it too many times. "Victoria's pregnant," he said without preamble. Rebecca felt like she'd been punched. "What?" she told me tonight. "She's 8 weeks along." Alexander leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. "And it's not mine. Our marriage isn't like that. It's someone else's baby." "Whose?" "Her ex-boyfriend. A guy named Daniel. She was with him right before the wedding, before her family pressured her into marrying me." Alexander looked at Rebecca, and his eyes were full of something she couldn't quite name. "She still loves him. She's been miserable this whole time, pretending to be happy with me when all she wants is to be with him." Rebecca didn't know what to say. Part of her felt bad for Victoria, trapped in a loveless marriage while pregnant with another man's child. But another part of her, the selfish part, felt a flutter of hope. "What's she going to do?" Rebecca asked. "She wants to tell Daniel. She wants to be with him, but she's terrified of what her family will do, of the scandal, of the business deal falling apart." Alexander rubbed his face with both hands. "She asked me what she should do, can you believe that? My fake wife, pregnant with another man's baby, asking me for advice. What did you tell her?" "I told her to be with the person she loves. I told her that hiding the truth never works out the way you think it will." He looked at Rebecca meaningfully. "I told her that I wasted 3 years not knowing about my children because someone made that decision for me, and I don't want her to make the same mistake with Daniel." They sat in silence for a moment. Rebecca could hear the old refrigerator humming, the sound of cars passing outside, the normal sounds of life continuing around them. "She's going to tell him," Alexander said finally. "Tomorrow. And then she wants to tell our families the truth. About everything. The fake marriage, the baby, all of it. But the business deal will probably fall apart, yeah." Alexander didn't sound as upset about that as Rebecca expected. Victoria's been working on a backup plan with her accountant. It might work. It might not. But she's tired of living a lie. "Aren't you scared?" Rebecca asked. "About what happens when the truth comes out?" "Terrified," Alexander admitted. "The board of directors might vote me out as CEO. The stock price will probably tank. There'll be press everywhere, asking questions, taking pictures. It's going to be ugly. Then why are you okay with it?" He reached across the table and took her hand. "Because I'm tired too, Rebecca. I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of having to sneak around to see my own children. I'm tired of looking at pictures of myself with Victoria and knowing it's all fake." His grip tightened slightly. "And I'm really tired of not being able to tell everyone that you're the person I want to be with." Rebecca's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. "Alexander, I know it's fast. I know we're still figuring things out. I know you might not feel the same way anymore after everything that's happened." He was talking quickly now, like he was afraid he'd lose his nerve. "But I need you to know that when this all falls apart, when the press is camped outside my house and the board is voting and everything is chaos, the only thing I'm going to care about is whether I still get to show up here every morning, whether I still get to see Ethan and Maya, whether you'll still let me be part of your lives." Rebecca felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "Of course you can still see them. They're your children. You'll always be part of their lives. That's not what I'm asking." Alexander's voice was soft. "I'm asking if I can be part of your life too. Not just as the twins' father, as someone who wants to try again. Who wants to do this right this time?" Before Rebecca could answer, her phone buzzed. Then Alexander's phone buzzed. Then both phones started ringing at once. Alexander looked at his screen and went pale. "It's Victoria." Rebecca answered her own phone. It was her mother, who she hadn't spoken to in months. "Mom, what's wrong? Are you watching the news?" Her mother practically shouted. "Because you need to turn on the news right now." Alexander had already pulled up a news site on his phone. His face had gone completely white. "What is it?" Rebecca asked, moving to look over his shoulder. The headline was everywhere, on every news site, every social media platform. Someone had leaked the story, but they'd gotten it wrong. Very wrong. Billionaire Alexander Chen's secret family exposed. Wife pregnant while he fathers children with mistress. There was a photo of Alexander at Rebecca's apartment, playing with the twins in the small courtyard. Someone had been watching them. Someone had taken pictures. And now those pictures were everywhere, along with a story that painted Rebecca as a homewrecker and Alexander as a cheater. "This isn't how it was supposed to come out," Alexander said, his voice hollow. "We were going to explain everything tomorrow the right way." Rebecca's phone kept buzzing. Text messages were pouring in from people she hadn't talked to in years. Friends, old classmates, even her former professors. Everyone wanted to know if it was true. There was a knock at the door, loud and insistent. Then another. Rebecca looked through the peephole and saw cameras. Reporters, at least 5 of them, crowding her doorway. "Ms. Morrison," one of them shouted. "Can you comment on your relationship with Alexander Chen? How long have you been seeing him? Did you know he was married?" Alexander was already on his phone calling someone. "I need security at this address. Now, yes, I know what time it is." "I don't care. Get someone here immediately." Another knock, louder. The twins were going to wake up. Rebecca's hands were shaking. "Miss Morrison, just a few questions. The public has a right to know." Alexander pulled Rebecca away from the door. "Don't open it. Don't say anything. Security will be here in 10 minutes. 10 minutes? Rebecca's voice was rising. "Alexander, they're going to wake up the kids. Ethan and Maya are going to be terrified." As if on cue, she heard Ethan start crying from the bedroom. The loud knocking had scared him. Then Maya started crying too. Alexander moved toward the bedroom. "I'll get them." "You can't." Rebecca grabbed his arm. "If they see you coming out of the bedroom, if they get a picture of that, it makes everything worse." "I don't care about the pictures. But I do." Rebecca was crying now too. "Those are our children, Alexander. They don't deserve this. They don't deserve to have their pictures all over the internet, to have people saying horrible things about their mother, to grow up with everyone knowing their business." The knocking continued. The crying got louder, and somewhere in the chaos, Rebecca realized that everything was falling apart even faster than Alexander had predicted. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. None of this was supposed to happen, but it was happening anyway. And now they had to figure out how to protect their children from a storm that had only just begun. The security team arrived and cleared the reporters from Rebecca's doorway, but the damage was done. By morning, the story had exploded. Rebecca's face was everywhere. Her name was trending on social media. Strangers were dissecting her life, her choices, calling her terrible things. She sat on her couch at 6 in the morning, scrolling through comments she knew she shouldn't read, while Alexander made breakfast in her kitchen. The twins were still asleep somehow, despite all the chaos. "You need to stop looking at that," Alexander said gently, taking her phone away. "None of those people know the truth." "Then maybe we should tell them." Rebecca looked up at him. "Maybe we should tell everyone exactly what happened. My PR team says that's a terrible idea. They want us to stay quiet, let the story die down. And how long will that take? Weeks, months?" Rebecca stood up, pacing. "Meanwhile, everyone thinks I'm some kind of mistress who broke up your marriage. They're saying awful things, Alexander. About me, about the twins. Someone posted a comment saying my children should be taken away from me." Alexander's jaw tightened. "Give me the phone. I'll handle it." "You can't handle it. Not without making it worse." Rebecca stopped pacing and looked at him. "Unless we tell the truth. All of it. If we do that, Victoria gets dragged into it. Her pregnancy, her relationship with Daniel, everything." As if summoned by her name, Rebecca's doorbell rang. This time it wasn't reporters. It was Victoria, wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap, looking nothing like the polished woman from the wedding photos. "We need to talk," Victoria said as soon as Rebecca opened the door. "All 3 of us. Right now." They sat in Rebecca's small living room. The same 3 people who'd made a deal 6 weeks ago. But everything had changed since then. I can't do this anymore, Victoria said, pulling off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red from crying. I can't keep pretending. Daniel saw the news. He called me last night asking if it was true, if I was pregnant. And I told him everything. About the fake marriage, about the baby being his, all of it. What did he say? Rebecca asked softly. He wants to be together. He wants to raise our child together. He said he never should have let my family pressure us apart in the first place. Victoria looked at Alexander. I'm sorry. I know we had an agreement. I know the business merger. I know there are consequences. But I can't live this lie anymore. Then don't, Alexander said simply. Victoria blinked. What? Rebecca told me something last night before everything exploded. She said our children don't deserve to grow up with everyone knowing their business, with people saying horrible things about their mother, and she's right. Alexander leaned forward. But you know what they deserve even less? Growing up with parents who are miserable. Growing up watching their father pretend to be married to one woman while loving another. Growing up thinking that's what relationships are supposed to look like. So what are you saying? Victoria asked. I'm saying we tell the truth. Today, right now. We call a press conference and we tell everyone exactly what happened. The fake marriage, the business arrangement, Rebecca and the twins, your pregnancy, Daniel, all of it. Your board will fire you, Victoria said, probably. The stock will crash. Maybe. Everyone will know our business. They already do. They just have the story wrong. Alexander looked at both women. I spent 3 years looking for Rebecca. Then I spent 6 weeks sneaking around to see my own children. I'm done hiding. I'm done pretending. Whatever happens after we tell the truth, we'll deal with it. Together. Rebecca felt something shift in her chest. Your family will be furious. My family has been trying to control my life for years. It's time I stopped letting them. Alexander reached over and took her hand. I want to be with you. I want to be a real father to Ethan and Maya. I want to stop living 2 different lives. And the only way to do that is to tell everyone the truth, no matter how messy it is. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone. Okay, let's do it. But I want Daniel there with me. I'm not doing this alone. 3 hours later, they stood in front of what felt like 100 cameras. Alexander had rented a hotel conference room and it was packed with reporters. Victoria stood on one side of him with Daniel holding her hand. Rebecca stood on the other side, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone could hear it. Alexander stepped up to the microphone. Thank you all for coming. I have a statement to make and then we'll take a few questions. The room went silent. 6 weeks ago, I married Victoria Hartwell in a business arrangement designed to merge our 2 companies. It was not a love match. We both went into the marriage knowing it was for practical reasons, not romantic ones. He paused, letting that sink in. On the day of our wedding, someone from my past appeared. Rebecca Morrison, a woman I had been in a relationship with 3 years ago. A woman I had been searching for since she disappeared. And she brought with her 2 children. My children, Ethan and Maya, who are 2.5 years old and who I knew nothing about until that day. Cameras flashed. Reporters started murmuring. Alexander kept going. Rebecca left 3 years ago because she believed I was about to marry someone else in an arranged marriage. She was pregnant and didn't want to complicate my life. She made a choice based on incorrect information, trying to protect everyone. I spent 3 years looking for her, not knowing I had children. When I found out the truth at my wedding, everything changed. He looked at Victoria, who nodded and stepped up to the microphone. I knew when I married Alexander that he didn't love me. I didn't love him either. We were both doing what our families wanted, what was best for business. But I was in love with someone else. His name is Daniel, and he's the father of the child I'm currently expecting. She reached for Daniel's hand. I've spent 6 weeks in a marriage that wasn't real, pretending to be someone I'm not. And I can't do it anymore. I want to be with Daniel. I want to raise our child together. And I want Alexander to be free to be with his family. The room erupted with questions, everyone shouting at once. Alexander held up a hand. I know this is complicated. I know it's messy. I know a lot of you think we should have handled this differently. And you're probably right. He looked directly at the cameras. But we're done hiding. Yes, I'm resigning from my position as CEO. Yes, Victoria and I are getting divorced. Yes, I'm in a relationship with Rebecca. And yes, Ethan and Maya are my children, and I intend to be the best father I can be to them. A reporter in the front row stood up. What about the business merger? What about the thousands of jobs that depend on it? Victoria's team has been working on an alternative plan that doesn't require our marriage. It's not perfect, but it saves most of the jobs. The details will be announced next week. Do you regret getting married in the first place? Another reporter asked. Alexander thought about that. I regret that it took a crisis for me to stop living the life other people wanted me to live. But I don't regret how it brought me back to Rebecca. I don't regret finding out about my children. Sometimes the worst days lead to the best changes. The press conference lasted another 30 minutes. Some reporters were sympathetic. Others were harsh, asking pointed questions about Rebecca, about why she'd hidden the children, about whether Alexander was fit to be a father when he'd only known about them for 6 weeks. But through it all, Alexander, Victoria, and Rebecca stood together. 3 people who'd made mistakes, who'd gotten tangled up in lies and arrangements and fears, finally telling the truth. That night, after the news had aired and the internet had its say, Rebecca put the twins to bed while Alexander cleaned up the kitchen. It was such a normal domestic scene, like they'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. What happens now? Rebecca asked when she came back out. I don't know, Alexander admitted. The board meets tomorrow to officially accept my resignation. Victoria and Daniel are looking at apartments together. And we figure out what comes next. Are you scared? Terrified. He smiled at her, but also relieved. For the first time in years, I'm not pretending to be someone I'm not. 6 months later, the story looked different. Alexander's company had hired a new CEO, and the stock had recovered after the initial drop. Victoria and Daniel had a beautiful baby girl and sent pictures to Alexander and Rebecca regularly. The business merger had happened in a modified form, saving most of the jobs. And Alexander showed up at Rebecca's apartment every single morning, not as a secret anymore, but as a father, as a partner, as someone who'd finally stopped letting fear and obligation make his choices for him. One morning, while making his terrible pancakes that the twins somehow still loved, he turned to Rebecca and said, I was thinking, that's dangerous, she teased. What if we made this official? Not the business arrangement kind of official, the real kind. Rebecca looked at him, at this man who'd spent 3 years searching for her, who'd learned to change diapers and read bedtime stories and make triangle toast for Maya, who'd risked everything to tell the truth. Are you asking me to marry you while making burnt pancakes? Is it working? Rebecca laughed, really laughed, for the first time in what felt like forever. Yes, it's working. Ethan and Maya ran into the kitchen, demanding breakfast and attention and all the chaos that came with being 2-year-old twins. And Alexander looked at Rebecca over their heads, both of them covered in flour, the pancakes definitely burning, and smiled like he'd never been happier. Sometimes you walk into the wrong wedding and find exactly what you've been looking for all along. You just have to be brave enough to tell the truth when it matters most.